Having clearly and philosophically established the truth that electricity in the form of nervous fluid is indeed the connecting link between mind and inert matter, the question now presents itself: if the mind continually throws off electricity from the brain by its mental operations and by muscular motion, then how is the supply kept up in the brain? Through what source is it introduced into the system, and how conveyed to the brain? I answer: respiratory organs. Electricity is taken into the blood at the lungs, and from the blood it is thrown to nerves and conducted to the brain, and is there secreted and prepared for the use of the mind. It will be impossible for me to argue this point fully, unless I explain at the same instant the philosophy of the circulation of the blood. As I differ also with physiologists on this point, and as I do not believe that the heart circulates the blood at all, either on the hydraulic or any other principle, so I will turn your attention to this subject. The philosophy of the circulation of the blood is one of the grandest themes that can be presented for human contemplator. While discussing this matter, it will be clearly made to appear how electricity is gathered from the surrounding elements, carried into the system, and stored up in the brain to feed the mind with impressions. I desire it to be distinctly understood that when I speak of the electricity, galvanism, and magnetism of the human system, or of the nervous fluid, I mean one and the same thing. But before I proceed to notice the philosophy of the circulation of the blood and the secretion of the nervous fluid, I will first make a few observations in relation to the nerves and blood vessels, so that I may be distinctly understood. I have already stated that the brain is the fountain of the nervous system, and that both its hemispheres are made up of congeries of nerves. They both pass to the cerebellum and the spinal marrow continued. To the bottom of the trunk is but the brain continued. In the spinal marrow, which is the grand conductor from the brain, is lodged the whole strength of the system. From this spinal marrow branch out 32 pairs of nerves, embracing the nerves of motion and those of sensation. From these branch out others, and others again from these, and so on till they are spread out over the human system in networks so infinitely fine that we cannot put down the point of a needle without feeling it, and we cannot feel unless we touch a nerve. We see, therefore, how inconceivably fine the nervous system is. In all these millions of nerves, there is no blood. They contain the electric fluid only, while the blood is confined to the veins and arteries. I am well aware that the blood vessels pass round among the convolutions of the brain, and through them the blood freely flows to give that mighty organ action. But in the nerves themselves there is no blood. They are the residence of the living mind and its prime agent, the electric fluid. Though I have frequently in my public lectures touched upon the philosophy of the circulation of the blood, and hence those remarks were reported and published in my lectures on the philosophy of animal magnetism in 1843, in connection with my views of the connecting link between mind and matter, yet I have never taken up the subject in an exact full and connected detail of argument. This I will now proceed to do in connection with the secretion of the nervous fluid. I would then, in the first instance, remark that the air we breathe, as to its component parts, is computed to consist of 21 parts oxygen and 79 parts nitrogen. Electricity, as a universal agent, pervades the entire atmosphere. We cannot turn the electric machine in any dry spot on earth without collecting it. Oxygen is that element which sustains flame and animal life. Neither can exist a moment without it, while nitrogen, on the contrary, just as suddenly extinguishes both. The atmosphere, in this compound state, is taken into the lungs. The oxygen and electricity have a strong affinity for moisture, instantly rush to the blood, while the nitrogen is disengaged and expired. The blood, being oxygenized and electrified, instantly assumes a bright cherry red appearance, and by this energizing process has become purified and prepared for circulation. The lungs and the blood they contain are both rendered electrically positive, and we know that in electrical science two positives resist each other and fly apart. Hence the lungs resist the blood and force it into the left ventricle of the heart. The valve closes and the blood passes into the arteries. Hence arterial blood is of a bright cherry red hue. It is by the positive force of electric action, propelled through every possible ramification of the arterial system, till all its thousands of minute capillary vessels are charged along these arteries, and all their thousands of capillary branches are laid nerves of involuntary motion, but no nerves whatever attend the veins. Why is this so? Why is it that nerves, like so many telegraphic wires, are laid along the whole arterial system in all its minute ramifications, but that none are laid upon the venous system? I press the question, why do nerves attend the arteries, while none attend the veins? I answer, that nerves are laid along the arteries to receive the electric charge from the positive blood that rolls in them, which charge the blood received from the air inspired by the lungs. But as the venous blood is negative, it has no electricity to throw off, and hence needs no attendant nerves to receive a charge. Because that very electric charge which the blood receives from each inspiration at the lungs is thrown off into the nerves by friction, as it rolls through its destined channels in crimson streams. At the extremities of the arterial system, at the very terminus of its thousands of capillaries, the last item of the electric charge takes its departure from the positive blood, escapes into the attendant nerves through them, is instantly conducted to the brain, and is there basined up for the use of the mind. The arterial blood, having thrown off its electricity, as above described, assume a purplish hue. It enters the capillaries of the veins, which are as numerous as those of the arteries. The blood is now negative, and as the lungs, by new inspirations, are kept in a positive state, so the venous blood returns through the right ventricle of the heart to the lungs, on the same principle that the negative and positive forces rush together. There it is again electrified and oxygenized, changed to a bright cherry red colour, is again rendered positive, and is thus purified and prepared once more for arterial circulation. We now clearly perceive that it is electrically the blood circulates, and electrically it recedes from and returns to the lungs through the two ventricles of the heart. The heart does not circulate the blood at all, as physiologists contend. The heart is the supreme regulator of a sublime and constantly ebbing and flowing ocean of crimson life, with all its majestic rivers and frolicking streams, and determines with exactness how rapidly the whole shall flow. Ladies and gentlemen, I have in my last lecture touched upon the philosophy of the circulation of the blood, the nervous system, and the secretion of electricity upon the brain, which I call the nervous fluid. As this part of my subject must, on account of its importance, possess peculiar interest to us all, I desire to dwell upon it a few moments longer. From the arguments already offered, it will be clearly perceived by every philosophic mind that the circulating system is in reality two distinct systems. The first is the arterial system that carries the positive blood, which is, as before stated, of a bright cherry red colour, and is ever flowing from the heart to the extremities. The second is the venous system that carries the negative blood, which is of a purple colour, and is ever flowing from the extremities to the heart. To these two circulating systems, the heart, with its two auricles, two ventricles, and valves, is exactly adopted so as to keep the positive and negative blood apart, and to regulate the motion of both. And it will be perceived that the nervous system must perfectly correspond with what I have said of the circulating system, I mean that nerves of involuntary motion are laid along the arteries to receive the charge of electricity from the positive blood that flows in them. These views of circulation of the blood are strengthened by the fact that the blood contains a certain portion of iron, and we well know that iron becomes a magnet only by induction and loses its magnetic power the moment the electric current passes from it. Hence the blood, through the agency of the iron it contains, can easily assume a positive state at the instant it receives the electric charge from the air at the lungs. It can then pass into the arteries, and by friction throw off its electricity into the nerves, and again assume a negative state as it enters the veins. I now consider the electric or magnetic circulation of the blood philosophically and irresistibly proved. Hence the position which many assume that the heart circulates the blood on the hydraulic or vacuum principle is utterly unfounded in truth, and that the heart in accomplishing this exerts a force they contend of more than 100,000 pounds is too preposterous to be believed. I grant that the heart is the strongest muscle in the human system, but who can for one moment believe that its motive power is equal to 50 tons? The heart, as I have already observed, does not circulate the blood at all, nor on the contrary does the blood cause the heart to throb. The heart and lungs both receive their motions from the cerebellum, which is the fountain and origin of organic life and involuntary motion. Hence the involuntary nerves from the cerebellum throb the heart and heave the lungs, and the electricity contained in the air they inspire circulates the blood and supplies the brain with nervous fluid, as I have already explained.